The only way is the right way, I might say. Nobody doing it better, y'all some lightweights. Malik Wright, up all day and all night, pushing all the buttons up to something till it's alright. He looking at it from all sides and angles, got a stripes on his body like he played for the Bengals. Oh man, there's no one discussing it. They came, they stayed, they either did it or done it. Man, I love it, cause all they ever do is win. So kick back, relax, the TWSN.
Thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of the Sit Down with Malik Wright recap show presented by the Right Way Sports Network. I'm your host, Malik Wright. It's been a while since I've been live, it feels, but I'm back here with my guy, Daniel Alameda, on the ones and twos. And we've got a special guest joining us in studio right now. You guys probably know him from the Sit Down Morning Show, our fantasy football advice. Got Michael Harrer joining us. He was awesome enough to come down here and watch the game with us and watch the Bengals defeat the Dallas Cowboys and what truly was a interesting game. It was an interesting game. A lot of breaks went their way, and it's crazy because this year I would say a lot of the balls didn't bounce the Bengals' way, but they somehow found a way to pull this one out. I definitely have my thoughts on who some of the players of the game was, but before we jump into all that, do us a favor, give this video a like, subscribe to the YouTube channel, turn on post notifications so you guys don't miss when we go live or upload content from the TWSN studios. Mike, Daniel, I got to get you guys' thoughts on the game, your reactions on the game. I want to start with you, Mike.
Yeah, as someone who really appreciates great wide receiver play, I mean, the one that stood out had to be Jamar Chase. I mean, just some of the most pure and crisp route running, that real timing route and pass from Joe Burrow on the touchdown, the first of 2 touchdowns from Jamar Chase. That's just pure Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow playing for the last 7 seasons together, dating back to their time at LSU. So yeah, it's just phenomenal to watch a guy play at this level and have that sort of connection with the quarterback. And they're just gonna have to back up the Brinks truck for Joe Burrow. ESPN's Ben Baby tweeted out during the game. Every game that this guy plays, the number keeps going up, and it's true. I mean, he just wows you every single week that he's out there, and just another staple game. And Daniel said it during the game. This could reasonably be an offensive player of the year campaign from Jamar Chase if he wasn't getting overshadowed by Saquon Barkley, and just another phenomenal game on the resume.
Yeah, I think that when you look at this game, the part that's frustrating, I think, so I'll just start with biggest takeaway, and it was actually after the game we were watching, and just seeing Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase actually happy and actually, looking like they're enjoying themselves. That's something that's a visual I think that's important for the Bengals brass, and that's just a sigh of relief, I feel like. And I feel like that's the painful part about the season, is that's what we're hanging our hats on, right? Is this was a sigh of relief saying, hey, it could have gone a lot worse, but at least we get a week to just relax. And I think that that's the frustrating part, but also the positive for Bengals fans, because these two dudes are playing their asses off, right? And you look at Jamar Chase, the campaign this dude is having, it's absurd. And like I said, I think that was, one of the biggest bright spots when it comes to just the morale of the team, right? At least you're heading into these next 4 games with some sort of positive momentum, versus if they would have lost this game, and we'll obviously discuss it in a little bit, but if you would have lost this game, coaching staff, a lot of this 4 straight losses could have really went to crap really, really quickly. But we're going to talk about the game as a whole, and it was a close game. It was a sloppy game in a lot of aspects for the Cincinnati Bengals, and we can talk about it, right? The offensive side of the ball. It's the same thing. These close, 1-score games, you finally got a ball to bounce your way with the punt return, but interception, multiple penalties, not capitalizing, drop balls, 3rd and short, going for it, a little fade to the end zone, kicking the field goal. These are all things that happen on the offense side of the ball, and these were, consistent trends with this Cincinnati Bengals offense for, a large portion of the season. So all around, I think this was a gritty game, and this is what the Bengals season really has been. It's been games where you feel like you should be performing a lot better. The Cowboys offense seriously lacked the punch in that second half. The Bengals defense did a very good job in the second half. And after those first two possessions, the Cowboys offense really didn't have a lot. So all around really scrappy game, and the ball bounced the right way for once for the Bengals. So,
well, there's a couple of takeaways that I took away from this game. And I'm gonna read a couple off to you. Jamar Chase is the best wide receiver in the NFL. Let's start there. Joe Burrow is the best quarterback in the NFL. Lou Anarumo, in my opinion, is still a good coach. The players still want to win. And I want us to hang on to some of those things that I said here. Because, make no mistake about it, the season is what it still is. You still have 8 losses on the season. But winning feels good.
Yeah.
Right? The players don't believe in tanking. The players don't give a damn about what draft position the Bengals might have, because a lot of these players are still trying to keep their jobs. They're trying to make sure they're going to be on a roster next year.
Yeah.
And so my thought process is that was good to see. And I think by the players still fighting, the players still wanting to win, the players still caring, I think I could say this: the players have not given up on this coaching staff.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't matter what people like me think. Doesn't matter what people with a mic think. Doesn't matter what people on the Twitter world think. The players still want to win. The players still have pride. And that's all you could ask for at this point, when your record is, what you say you are, what it says you are. The fact of the matter is the Bengals defense does need some overhauling, right? The fact of the matter is the Bengals do need better guard play. These are things that we can agree upon.
Yeah.
This was a game, albeit it was against Cooper Rush, but I thought Cooper Rush was running the Cowboys offense as effective as Dak Prescott was for a while there, last couple of weeks. This was a game in which it was going to test the merit of this coaching staff. It was going to tell us, okay, what this could look like the rest of the way. Winning, right? Winning does cure a lot of things. But this does not mean that this offseason, the Bengals will, not make changes still. Make no mistake about it. But it could be the difference of making drastic changes or making positional changes. Maybe making personnel changes. Hats off to some of the players that stepped up today. Guys like Chase Brown, phenomenal game. Gritty game, right? They went to Mike Gesicki towards the end of the game. Drew Sample stepped up when his number was called. Is there anybody that stood out to you guys that maybe I may have missed there? Oh, Marco Wilson.
Yeah.
Marco Wilson. Hats off to Marco Wilson. He did a great job stepping in there. He was just, claimed by the Bengals. He's coming from New England, didn't work out there, but this is a guy that was known for his athleticism, for his freakish athleticism. And he went out there. He was guarding CeeDee Lamb. He was guarding Brandon Cooks, Kavontae Turpin. He really did a nice job out there today. That doesn't mean that, he's the answer. And guys like Joseph Osai, thank you, chat, I appreciate you guys for bringing that up as well. Joseph Osai stepped up in a big way today. So those are some things that we're good to see. What else stood out to you guys in this game, Mike?
I think it's really important that someone other than Trey Hendrickson was getting there in the pass rush. So, a sack from anyone other than Trey is big. But on the negative side, it was another underwhelming game for me from the interior defensive line. I was hoping Chris Jenkins would get a little bit more run this week. Or early snap counts coming in. He's playing about half of the snaps. So not a whole lot of opportunity for Chris Jenkins, but just another week of a lack of a push from the interior defensive line. I said it during the game. It just seems like you could count on the number of times on one hand that we're getting a big push on these run plays and finding a pass rush from anyone other than Trey Hendrickson. So a lot left, a lot of room to grow still, in my opinion, for the defensive line. We talked about it. You mentioned it, Malik, an overhaul of the defense. And I do think the defensive interior there is one weak spot, and just the defensive line in general. I think we can all agree that we need some new pieces, hopefully acquired through the draft. And just overall for me, it was a really conflicting game for me as a fan. Just like we've touched on, you don't, the last thing you want to see is Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow disgruntled and upset with what the direction of the franchise. But as much as anyone else, I want that draft capital. I want to be able to acquire some young talent. But I can't say I'm upset with the win, but hurting our future draft stock is not what you want to see. So some positives and some negatives. Ultimately, I'm happy to see them pick up a 1-score win and finally put it together and get the ball to bounce the right way for them and find something in the end of the game. So as a fan at the end of the game, I would say generally happy, but obviously some things to clean up moving forward.
Yeah, I think that, you touched on it too. And when we look at the defense side of the ball, it really was like a game of just showing a lot of these young guys. Miles Murphy, I'm curious to see, how many snaps he got. He was out there for a long time. It at least seemed like this might have been, the most snaps he's gotten this entire season. And when you look at the rest of the guys, the real issue, in the passing game, it was really only 2 big plays. When you actually think about it, the first play was obviously the quick screen to CeeDee Lamb, multiple broken tackles, 40-something yard gain around. That just comes down to tackling. The other one was all-out blitz, Mike Hilton 1-on-1 with CeeDee Lamb. Besides that, the dudes kind of stepped up. DJ Ivy played, had some good reps and coverage against, multiple tight ends. These guys, the Cam Taylor-Britt looked fine. They look solid. Marco Wilson, they look solid. And I think this is the type of performance that the Bengals defense needed. At least, in the secondary, Geno Stone got, his interception. That was, he had a pretty decent game, had that huge sack or, that pressure. And I think that the issue with this game on the defense side of the ball, it was just consistently, Rico Dowdle getting to the second level. And I think that that's where, when you're addressing this team for the future, you have to ask yourself, what's the reasoning for that? You can talk about the defensive line. We can also talk about the linebackers. And I think as the offseason approaches, that's going to be one of my, biggest takeaways is you have to get more athletic at the linebacker position. And that's a Jermaine Pratt conversation. He had a couple good plays, but when you look at the rest of these teams in the NFL, the teams like the Dallas Cowboys with, DeMar Overshown, obviously he got hurt today, but there's a lot of teams with linebackers, and these dudes are hyper athletic. And I feel like that's what this Bengals defense needs at times. They just look like they're running in quicksand. And I think that's where, this isn't just going to be a quick, fix by adding a draft pick. This is going to, hey, you have to go in free agency in the draft. And I think you just got to get more athletic. But all around, this was, I think the takeaway that you guys said, this team still wants to win. And I think the fact that they're still fighting for it, you'd be surprised how many teams aren't willing to fight for it at this point in the season. You could look at multiple different teams. Look at, the New York Giants. Look at the, Las Vegas Raiders at times. Look at the Cowboys defense. In my opinion, at the end of the game, they just lacked a push. They just lacked a want it. And I think that's where this Bengals team at least showed that today. They wanted to win. I think you got 4 games left in the season and still a lot of time to build some positive momentum. So
Can we have this conversation though? It's a bit of a, a weird spot for me because I feel like the last couple of weeks we've pounded for not us, but people alike have pounded for the firing of Lou Anarumo. And I'm not using this. I've been here before. Like I've literally been in this spot before where I remember being the only one dying on a hill saying that I think this guy is a good defensive coordinator. He just needs his own guys in here. Then it took that big, game. I believe it was on Sunday night against the Steelers. Everyone to realize, okay, maybe this guy isn't as bad as we think he are. Do you think this game said a lot about Lou? Daniel, Mike, do you guys think this game said a lot about Lou? I personally feel like it showed he's not washed. He knows what he's doing. He's capable of doing what he's doing. I just think the players need to develop a level of consistency. And listen, communication, right, and the ability to make plays. Those are all things that do fall back on coaching. But what tonight showed is, if he does have players playing in unison, players all on the same page, communication is there. I think this Bengals defense can still be good.
Yeah.
Maybe in the numbers don't say that this year, but I remember there has been countless years where guys who we think are great defense coordinators, guys like Dennis Allen, have had shaky years with New Orleans. Guys like Steve Spagnuolo have had shaky years with Kansas City, and they were able to, withstand the media push for their firing and all that kind of stuff like that. And once they got different talent in there, guess what? It looked a little different. It really did. And I'm not here trying to stand for Lou. I'm just here trying to have an open, honest conversation,
Yeah.
honest dialogue, because it can't be a thing of, if the players are being inconsistent at some point, oh, he sucks. Let's fire this guy one game. And then it's like, well, he's great, or the players are great. Like, I feel like it tells you a lot. I think it tells you a lot that a guy like Geno Stone is starting to get more comfortable in the defensive system. And we're starting to see, we started to see it this game. It looked a little different.
Yeah.
He played his best game as a Bengal tonight. I just want to have the conversation because it's a touchy topic. Everyone's coming out with pitchforks saying fire Lou. Well, are you going to give him credit? Because the fact of the matter is they did their job tonight. They did what they were supposed to tonight. And without that defensive performance, the Bengals don't win this game, respectfully.
Yeah. I think, no, you're right. I think for me, it really is. My thing is, we were all watching the pregame. The narrative is that it's all the defense's fault. And I think that that's the completely wrong narrative. The narrative and the conversation can be, hey, if we're, trashing on the Bengals defense, we have to do the same, and we have to be honest with ourselves about the Bengals offense. And I feel like that's where the conversation is, right? When we think about Lou and Zach Taylor, I do agree. I think that Lou is a very good defense coordinator, and it can be the same thing. I think Zach is a good head coach. I think he's fine. And I think that's where the conversation is, right? If we're keeping Lou and if we're keeping Zach, what's going to change, right? Is it the defensive personnel? I think that that's a huge thing, but the question is really going to be, and I'm with you, I think that Lou's a good defense coordinator. I think that he showed some bright spots, and I just hate that the whole narrative is, and we saw it, all the talking heads today. Every single conversation was the Bengals defense is the reason why the Bengals are here. And that's not how I see it. I see a team who is now 2-7 in one-score games. I don't view that all in the Bengals defense. So I think that this was a gritty performance from the Bengals defense. I think that this is what they've shown time in and time out. You go and look at, you look at that Chargers game. You look at, there's been multiple games where, boom, they get, dog walked for the first two possessions, and they find a way to strap their boots in and stick it in. And that's what this game, they were down, they gave up 10 quick points, easily could have been 14 points. And then for the rest of the game, it was a grind for the Cowboys offense. So I think that that's where my thought process is. And I was at a point two games ago, and I was at a point last week saying, you need to just clean house and you need a fresh start. We're at the point now, for me, this team could save themselves these next 4 weeks, depending on how they play. So that's my thought process. Mike, what do you think?
I want to go back to what Malik was saying. Like, do we pin this all on Lou Anarumo? Yeah. And someone said it in the chat, summed it up pretty quickly, pretty perfectly. Get them players. I think that the struggles of the defense, and like you said, Daniel, it's not all to blame on the defense. Obviously, it's the clear weak point of the Bengals' three units, but you just get the guy players. I think these struggles are an indictment on the front office in Cincinnati. I mean, we were talking about it. They just refuse to extend talent that isn't considered a cornerstone talent in the franchise. And most notably, in the last couple of years, they've let Jesse Bates walk and they've let DJ Reader walk, and they've attempted to replace them and just utterly failed with these draft picks and free agent signings. I mean, Nick Scott, Geno Stone. I know Geno Stone had made a play, had some good good pressure, a pick tonight, had his best game as a Bengal, but still largely a failure. I mean, I don't need to go back and talk about Nick Scott from last season. Sheldon Rankins, I know he's been out the last couple of games with an illness, but largely a failure. And I just think that this goes to show that we just, as a franchise, we need to modernize, we need to adapt. I mean, this is one of the more inept front offices in the NFL. They refuse to modernize. They refuse to make the moves and be aggressive in free agency and re-signing their own players. They won't even keep players in-house. It's not like they're not going out and making the moves and acquiring players that they need to. They won't keep the guys in the building that they need to. So I really do think it comes down to personnel and just a complete failure and lack of interest in providing Lou Anarumo with the right people to build out his defensive scheme and find success.
I think that was so beautifully said by you, Mike. And I agree with you with a lot there. I do think there is some. I think there needs to be a serious discussion, but I also want to say this is what we were hoping to see. We were hoping to analyze everyone, from the coaching staff right down to the players, right? We wanted to see, Joe Burrow said it best last week. We'll know through the next couple of weeks who we can count on for the long haul and who we can't. I think that when we look at it from that perspective, we're going to continue to analyze. We're going to continue to, be critical of the play calling. We're going to continue to be critical of how this looks the rest of the way. They've got 4 more games? Got 4 more games to save their jobs. This coaching staff does. 4 more games to prove that they belong. 4 more games to prove that this could be the coaching staff to break through with this team. 4 more games. That's all that matters. Nothing else. That's the way you have to look at it. Nothing else matters. You could only play the team that is in front of you. Now, it's funny. Daniel and I were talking about this. I think that Lou's defense is going to statistically look better at the end of the season based upon how some of the teams that they're playing down the stretch here. Yeah. Going into tonight's game, they had the 16th rated rushing defense.
Mm-hmm.
A few weeks ago, they had the 9th. Right? So if they could string together more good performances like this, do you get a guy like DJ Turner back at any point in time? Right? Because I know he was on the IR thing and there was some hope that he could potentially come back. But what does it look like if they're able to string together a couple more performances? Does the narrative switch here? Because I think that what he can do, right, the next couple stretch of games with the crop that he has to work with, especially in the secondary, I think that says a lot about him as a coordinator personally. Because no matter which way we slice it, guess what? It's the NFL. Mm-hmm. Teams are talented. Yeah. Teams are going to find ways to score. And they found a way to apply pressure. They found a way to get to the quarterback. And listen, I understand who they're facing. I get it. Dallas Cowboys, Cooper Rush starting quarterback.
So many teams face these teams.
It's so many teams that face these teams. And the one thing I'll say is, I don't get the narrative when people say, well, they played Cooper Rush or they played the Cowboys. Well, do you want them to roll over? Do you expect them to just not perform? I feel like this performance said a lot about them. And it was a couple of times where, they were getting the offense the ball. They were creating stops. All right. But today, I think what we saw, hear me out, was what we always wanted to see. We saw 3 phases of football. We saw offense, defense, and special teams. That is what we saw. We saw juice in the return game, right? We saw people creating plays on special teams, such as, hey, the block punt, keeping your eyes about you. Jean Meta, a guy that wasn't getting a lot of play time, going out there, creating a critical moment. Without that play, they don't win that game. Yeah. So it shows that these coaches, Darren Simmons, Lou Anarumo, they're good coaches. But again, with having a young team, you need to be coachable. You need to be willing to learn. And you need to be able to press forward. Daniel, I want to get to some of these questions here. Yeah. If we can pull some of them up. I love to answer your questions. I will be live again tomorrow morning for the sit-down morning show as we recap this Bengals game. And we'll have a little bit more intricate conversation. It'll be the conversation me and Zim usually have each and every single week where we talk about the state of the Cincinnati Bengals team. But I definitely want me and Mike to answer some questions here for you guys.
So first question from Tom Jones. He's asking about Bill Belichick. He said, do you guys think that Bill Belichick will go to the University of North Carolina? Obviously, this isn't about the Bengals, but
I think it's some posturing. I think there's a lot of stuff there. I think it's a loaded question. I think a lot of it comes down to what jobs open up with the NFL. North Carolina's not in a situation where they could wait either, though. The one thing I will say, though, is on top of that is, there's been a lot of chatter, obviously, with people talking about Bill Belichick, Cincinnati, how it makes a lot of sense. I'll say this. I think missing the playoffs with how you end the season is going to be so pivotal. It's going to be so critical to this coaching staff's future. Missing the playoffs with Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase having the season they're having is abysmal. And that would constitute change, in my opinion. It would have to. No matter what it says we are, no matter what the numbers say you are. Now that you could be auditioning for your next job. You could be auditioning to prove that you can be a defensive coordinator. You can be a head coach in the National Football League. All right. So these coaches still have things to coach for. These players still have things to play for. And just my thought process. I don't think one game absolves anything from any potential changes that could happen. Mike, any thoughts you want to give?
Yeah, on just Bill Belichick, I really just think this is a simple case of just the media needing something to talk about. Bill Belichick to the North Carolina Tar Heels. I mean, come on now.
Yeah.
I understand that the entering the world of college football is within the realm of possibility, but I think this is just like the first concrete reporting of Bill Belichick drawing interest from a team, whether it's NFL or college. So yeah, I really don't think there's much weight to this one. I know that there's the whole narrative with his son being the coach in waiting, but yeah, I really wouldn't be looking too much into this one. And maybe we'll be having the conversation about Bill to Cincinnati. I really do think he could do make some very positive changes in terms of the culture and just the general toughness and outlook of this team moving forward. So we can have that conversation when that day comes, but I'm not putting too much stock into Bill Belichick to the North Carolina Tar Heels.
Yeah.
So we got a question from Alex Charensky. He said, I might have butchered his name, but talking about Mike Gesicki, do you think that the Bengals are going to re-sign Mike Gesicki? He was obviously on a 1-year deal.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely see a world in which that does happen. No doubt. I think Mike made himself some money this season for sure. Now, I think it would behoove Mike. He's been around the league. He realizes not all teams are alike. I think it would make a lot of sense for him to try and stay in Cincinnati and sign maybe a 1 or 2 year deal and try to really establish some stability. That's just my thought process.
Yeah, I mean, I've liked what they're doing with the personnel sets with Gesicki. Personally, I was really, really excited about what Andre Yoshivas could do coming into this season as that giant, massive slot receiver looking to fill the shoes of Tyler Boyd. It's been very, very underwhelming. A lot of empty routes for Andre Yoshivas throughout the year. And I like what Mike Gesicki can bring to the table. I mean, he's listed as a tight end, but we're just talking about yet another enormous slot receiver. And I think he brings a lot of versatility to the table. They can do a lot with him on the field. So yeah, I hope he signs a short-term contract. I mean, obviously that's not like a guy who you're going to build your offense around by any means, but I think he can be a solid role player.
Yeah, I think he'd be that number. I can think he could fill into that number 3 spot until a guy like Jermaine Burton
100%.
or whoever the next said receiver is can step in.
100%. A couple tough years for Gesicki in New England, but I mean, the Mac Jones-led offense in New England, I mean, that wasn't really producing many stars or just general production for anyone who is catching passes from Jones. So I think he's found a solid new home here in Cincinnati, and I do hope he sticks around.
Yeah.
So we got a couple questions about Geno Stone. They're asking, Percy Jackson asked, as well as somebody else. Malik, do you think that the interception is indicative of a turnaround for Geno Stone?
I think it's indicative of being at the right place at the right time. I think it's also indicative of him being he's getting definitely more comfortable in Cincinnati in this scheme. It took a lot longer than we expected, but I believe that's what it is. I saw another question where people said, somebody asked the question, Daniel, and they said, is the Geno Stone signing? They were asking, is he just not a good player?
Yeah.
Was it a failure on the front office? Is he being coach bad? I think that we overrated Geno Stone a little bit, respectfully. I think that we allowed what he did in Baltimore and what Mike McDonald was able to do when you have a Roquan Smith. Because remember, that Baltimore defense looked completely different before they went out and traded for a Roquan Smith. I think that we saw what he was able to do with that very talented Baltimore Ravens defense, and we all thought that we're getting some potential on the cusp elite safety, or potentially could grow into that, especially when you look at the huge interception year he had last year. I think when you strip away the elite play at linebacker, when you strip away the different stunts and blitzes that Baltimore likes to do, and the guys they have up front like Odafe Owe, or what's the kid's name? Not the kid, but the defensive tackle that everybody loves.
Yeah.
It's gonna come to me, but who they just gave a big contract to. Justin Matabuke, right? When you strip away all that, life comes at you fast a little bit. I do believe that Geno Stone is about 2 notches above a Nick Scott that was here in Cincinnati.
It's not that hard to be a couple notches above.
No,
Nick Scott,
it's not. It's not. But I think that he's better than Nick Scott, but I think he's also was a little overrated. But who knows? maybe if he is here next year, maybe he can continue to grow again. But these next 4 games are critical to him too, because you're using it all as an evaluation of what this guy could look like for the future.
Oh, I'm on the same page as you in general, Malik. It's simply a case of this guy standing in the right place at the right time. I mean, I remember when we signed Geno Stone this offseason, there was Ravens fans out there talking about, yeah, this guy stinks. He just gets lucky by standing in the right spot. And I was like, no way. This guy is second in the league in interceptions last year. Like, he's got to be a strong safety. I mean, obviously, I'm not watching every single snap of the Ravens defense last year, but I watched my fair share. And my takeaway was that this guy was a quality player. You go back and look at those picks from 2023, and yeah, those Ravens fans were right, and we've seen it come to fruition this year. He has not been a quality player, and this week, I mean, it's quite literally the definition of just standing in the right place at the right time. It bounces off of Cam Taylor-Britt's hands, and he's just standing right there, and it falls into his lap. So I don't think this is indicative of a turnaround for Geno Stone. I think this is a guy that the Bengals need to move on from this offseason.
Yep.
So a lot of people are asking to have the Chase Brown conversation. We got like multiple comments from Rage. He said, do you think that Chase Brown is coming into his own? Joe said, is Chase Brown the 3rd best player on the offense? And Rucci said, Chase Brown is rounding out to be another great back for the Bengals. What's your guys' thoughts on Chase Brown and his performance?
I'll hand that off to Mike.
Yeah, Malik and I talked about this during the game. I'm very, very happy about what Chase Brown's brought to the table so far this season. He brings that explosive element. They like him as a pass catcher as well. You saw that design. It was like a quick little slant. I don't know who they had going on the out route, but a quick little slant design to Chase Brown. So this guy can do it all. I mean, he was a full-blown bell cow back in his final year at Illinois. He's the type of back who can handle 20 touches a game and hold up just fine. The only concern with Chase Brown is his ability in pass protection. That was a huge concern last year, and you still see them using Drew Sample in the backfield to help out in pass pro. So if he can shore up his skills in pass protection, I think this guy can be one of the premier workhorse backs in the NFL. He has that second, third gear that not many backs are able to hit. He can create explosive plays through the air and on the ground. His success rate is really, really high. So he's just keeping the Bengals moving the sticks, keeping them on schedule. So I'm really, really excited about what Chase Brown can bring to the table. They got him as a steal in the 5th round. I think moving forward, he can be a focal point of this offense. And I'm really, really excited to see what he brings in year 3.
I love that. I just want to bring out something real quick about Sheldon Rankins for a second. There's a reason why you haven't heard a lot of media people come out in Cincinnati and really criticize the signing. From what I can tell you guys, what I've been told, the sickness that Sheldon Rankins has been dealing with, I don't want to divulge too much information, get into his business, but he is dealing with an actual sickness, an actual serious sickness, and he was in the hospital. I would just say, just give him a little grace, because we are talking about somebody that is human, before they're a football player. And I understand, we all have rooting interest in the Bengals. We want to see the Bengals do well, but it is a serious situation. All we could do is try to hope that he gets better, he gets healthy, and focuses on his health first. And that's all I will probably comment for the rest of the season on Sheldon Rankins.
Yeah, I think that's important. It also just makes sense. Like, if any human, normal person goes to the hospital for a sickness, like, you got to give them the same leeway as an athlete. Like,
I don't know if a lot of people were privy to how many days he actually spent in the hospital, and how that whole thing kind of like shook out. So like, I just want Sheldon Rankins to get better and get healthy. That's all I care about.
So we got a question from Joe Burrow's press conferences. In this, he said, I'm confident we're going to do what it takes to get T back, and I'm going to do what it takes to get him back. What's your guys' thoughts on that? You just said that.
Yeah, man. I mean, it makes sense. I think that, from what I heard behind the scenes, T. Higgins is still actively trying to stay in Cincinnati. Like, he is fighting tooth and nail. He still wants to be in Cincinnati. He wants to be a Bengal. He loves Cincinnati. He grew up a Bengals fan. Like, there's so much involved in there. I think it's a long shot that he's not. I think it's a long shot that, the Bengals just let him walk, essentially. I think there's a world in which T. Higgins is back in Cincinnati next year. And it's crazy. A couple months ago, I don't know if I would have saw that. You got to realize, I don't know if, when you go out and you make an agent change, I don't know if, the visions always align. We could see a situation. If a player wants to be somewhere, they'll force their way. Remember TJ Watt? He wanted to be in Pittsburgh. He said, screw what his agent wanted. And he went in there, he took control, and he got the deal done with Pittsburgh. Does that mean the Bengals are going to shell out ridiculous money for T. Higgins? No. But the fact of the matter is, I know that T wants to be back in Cincinnati, and this could be a situation in which he just has to take control and says, "Hey, like, whether it's I doubt he wants to play on a franchise tag, but the Bengals would be foolish to just let that guy walk." But I know T is going to do everything in his power to remain a Cincinnati Bengal. We'll see if the Bengals play ball.
Yeah, it really just comes down to, like we were talking about earlier, the Bengals modernizing and getting creative with his contract structure. And Higgins is going to have to say no to probably somewhere in the range of $30 million from some other team out there. So, I mean, that's really going to come down to T. Higgins, whether he's committed to this franchise or, I mean, you can't blame the guy for wanting to go out and get paid upwards of $100 million from some other franchise. There was reports today of the Patriots saying they were going all in, going to make a home run swing at T. Higgins. So it's going to have to, everything's going to have to come together in terms of the Bengals putting together the right contract for him. And him saying no to some other team, just backing it up and paying him all the money for him. So we'll see what happens. I at a minimum, I just hope for my sanity that the Bengals put together a competitive and compelling offer for Higgins. If he walks away and takes the money, you can't be upset about it. But the Bengals at least putting forth the effort and being competitive with it, that's all you can hope for as a fan.
So we got a question asking about Mike Hilton from Jared Gundler. Do you guys think that Mike Hilton is becoming a major liability on the Bengals defense?
I felt this way for the last 2 seasons, respectfully. It's the reason why they needed to overhaul the cornerback position to a degree. He's good at what he's good at. He's good at tackling, good blitzer. When you talk about coverage, it was in so many games you could turn on the film from last year. He was picked on. It's been that way for the last 2 seasons. It's been picked on a little bit. So while I like Mike Hilton, I think he is a pro's pro. He's been a great veteran for this team and for these young players. I think knowing when to say when and not holding on to guys too long is also important. So that's just my thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, we knew the plan coming into the season was Dax Hill taking over that slot corner role. And obviously injuries to numerous Bengals cornerbacks have played a role in Mike Hilton being an every down player. But I mean, at the end of the day, you really can't have a guy who's 5'9", 30 years old and largely struggles in coverage as your go-to slot corner. So yeah, it's not a guy you want to have in your lineup consistently and relying upon him to cover guys out of slot. Like guys like CeeDee Lamb, the Cowboys are able to creatively utilize him and move him in and out of the slot and put him into favorable matchups with guys like Mike Hilton. So I really just think it's a situation of the Bengals being put in a bad spot in terms of their injuries and whatnot. So I'm looking forward to seeing what Dax Hill can do next year. And ideally moving forward, Mike Hilton is not going to be a player that the Bengals defense relies on.
I also want to just clarify on something. This is Joe Burrow's team. Okay. This ain't Zach Taylor's team. This is Joe Burrow's team. The organization will be structured in his image. They've never had a quarterback like Joe Burrow. They've never had a receiver like Jamar Chase. So if Joe Burrow's standing in front of the podium, it don't matter what I'm hearing. It don't matter what other people are saying. No matter what people think. Opinions go out the effing window. If Joe Burrow stands up in front of the podium and he says, hey, he's confident that the Bengals will do everything in their power to keep T. Higgins, and T. Higgins will be back as a Bengal, I will take his word at it. There must be something we don't know that makes him feel convicted to say that. So I would just say, this is his team. This is a team that's going to build what they want it to look like around what Joe Burrow wants. And I think the fact that Joe Burrow is starting to be more vocal, right? When he does talk about, how he wants this to look like, how he talks about how the reps are important to him, how he says, he doesn't take for him. This is my opinion. I feel for the Bengals is probably a player you could probably get once in a decade. Maybe not even once in a decade. I would say like once in a lifetime, damn near, probably. Choose wisely. Every decision you make, you should do it with him in mind. You should do it with this team in mind. Trying to bring a championship to Cincinnati should be the ultimate goal. And so, if you want to make sure you don't do anything to muddy the waters with that guy, include him in those conversations. Make sure he's happy. But again, it's going to be interesting to see what happens.
So we got a question from AMD is asking about Sam Hubbard and Miles Murphy. What was you guys?
Talking about how he's not a legitimate pass rusher. They need to get more out of Miles Murphy this season. And I mean, that is just completely held up. They're still not giving Miles Murphy the go-to role, the full-time role. They were still Miles Murphy not upgraded like and I know you're still clinging on to hope for the season and fighting for wins and scrapping for wins and making the decisions that you think will put the team in the best position to win. But I just really would like to see Miles Murphy in a full-time role, getting a full complement of snaps and seeing what we have in him, because I mean, I would hate to have to go out. I think that's very much in the realm of possibility, but I would hate to have to go out and spend yet another first round, another day one pick on a pass rusher, on an edge rusher. So, well, I really want to leave this season knowing what we have in Miles Murphy and understanding whether or not we can rely on him in the future.
So some people are asking also about some of our other, role players like Khalil Herbert. What was you guys' overall thoughts on the role players like a Khalil Herbert and some of the backup guys like Jung Meta?
I mean, I thought Khalil Herbert did well in his return role that he had. It certainly brings some juice to the position, which sort of what you want to see. But that's all I really got to say about that. And let us know as well. I see some people in the comment section saying they're having some streaming issues. Let us know if the issues are persistent. If we'll try to figure it out on our end. It seems like everything's coming clear on our end. So let us know if there's something that's happening.
Yeah. So when we look at also some other people are just asking, do you think that the Bengals are going to be able to pay both Jamar Chase and T. Higgins at the same time?
Well, Joe Burrow said something interesting in the full quote. It wasn't just, he's confident the Bengals get back. He said he is confident, and I quote, let me pull the quote up exactly. He's confident they will be able to find a way to get T. Higgins back, and he's willing to do what it takes on his end. And he believes T. Higgins is also willing to do what it takes. That's what he said. So there might be something done with Joe Burrow's contract that will allow the Bengals to have the necessary resources. Whatever conversations those two have, he wouldn't come out and say that specific thing if he wasn't confident enough that they'd probably be able to get a T. Higgins back. So there's something definitely brewing up. And the follow-up question was, why do you feel so overwhelmingly confident that you guys better bring T. Higgins back? He looked at the reporters, he smiled, and he said, we'll see. So we'll see.
Nothing would make me happier than seeing the Bengals restructure Joe Burrow's contract in an effort to bring back T. Higgins. I've talked about it, I think 3 times on the show already. Just seeing the Bengals front office move forward and not be stuck in decades past, and with the way they structure their contracts and just generally operate as a franchise, that would put just a massive grin on my face as a fan who hopes that the Bengals will do whatever it takes to win a Super Bowl with Joe Burrow in town. And you talked about it, Malik. Joe Burrow, once in a lifetime player.
Yeah.
I sit here on this couch today. I can confidently say Joe Burrow will be the best Bengals quarterback that I see in my lifetime.
Yes.
And if they don't do whatever it takes and make the changes necessary as a franchise to cater to Joe Burrow and bring in the personnel required to push for a Super Bowl consistently year in and year out, I will be pretty disappointed as a fan. And I think getting creative and offering T. Higgins a solid contract in the hopes of bringing him back into the building, I think that's a very, very massive step in the right direction. Is it realistic? I'm not so sure, but like I said before, just at least putting it out there and making it a possibility is a very, very encouraging sign for the direction of this franchise.
I agree.
And we got a question from Percy Jackson, another good one from him. He said, do you think that the Bengals should try to win out the rest of the season or lose as many as they can for a higher pick?
The focus from this coaching staff and the players are going to be trying to win as many games, because mathematically, somehow, they're still not eliminated from playoff contention. But
Yeah.
honestly, it's not even about that. It's really just about building some momentum, having something to fight for, realizing who are going to be some of the players you can rely on for the future, and realize if this team is still showing fight. If this team is still showing fight, I don't know what the coaching staff, I mean, what the ownership group is going to hang their hat on and say this, what ultimately what led to the season being what it is. Will they look at Duke? Will they look at rearranging some stuff? Will they look at the defensive staff? Will they look at the head coach? Will they look at I doubt they look at pitcher, but what will they do? Nobody knows. But again, there's so much more. I mean, how you look is important, but even more so how you look on prime time when the eyes of the world are on you, when you're the only NFL game on, that's the stuff that matters to this organization, that matters to this front office. Be it as it may, is it wrong? I have no idea. Is it right? I have no idea. But these are things that are important to them. And the fact of the matter is the Bengals went out on prime time in Dallas to a team in Dallas that won 3 straight games, and they won. The defensive coordinator was getting hammered with a lot of, he's terrible, fire him. And the defense looked good with makeshift players. We'll see how it all looks, but there's a lot for the Blackburns, the Browns to think about for the next 4 weeks and moving forward. Mike?
Yeah, I'm really, really conflicted with this. For one, just statistically, you see that the Bengals are just immense long shots to make the playoffs this season. But in my heart of hearts, I think the Bengals can compete with the class of the AFC.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we've seen multiple leads blown to the Ravens in the fourth quarter. The Chiefs game coming down to one play. So would love to see this team in the playoffs. Obviously, the odds are stacked against them. So it's really tough. But one thing that I think you touched on, Malik, is that in the NFL, teams, they just don't lie down. I think a really good example of this, I was listening to a podcast earlier today. They were talking about Trevor Lawrence. I mean, the dude's left shoulder is detached from his torso, and he's going out there and suiting up and fired up to go play for Doug Peterson. Like NFL players, they don't just lie down. NFL teams, they don't just lie down, especially a guy like Zach Taylor, who is undoubtedly at this point on the hot seat. He's not going to just rein it in and say, you know what, we're going to go play for a draft pick. Mm-hmm. We're not going to try and win football games. So as much as I want them to try and lose games and potentially get a better draft pick and bring in a quality player in the draft this year, it's not the reality of the NFL. So I like the Bengals aren't going to roll over and say, you know what, Browns and Steelers and whoever they have left, Broncos left on the schedule, Titans, go ahead, just beat us by 20 points. Mm-hmm. That's just not going to happen. And I just think we have to understand what we want as fans is just so vastly different from the mindset and thinking of the front office, the coaching staff, and the players. They could not give a damn what we think as fans. So they're going to go out there and try to win games. I wish that we could have we could get a better draft pick moving forward, but I guess I'll just be clinging on to my hope that we make the playoffs, a couple of things bounce our way, and we win out. I know, once again, the odds are stacked against us, but at the end of the day, Joe Burrow is going to try and win football games. Jamar Chase, Zach Taylor, they're all going to continue to try to win football games. So I'm just going to be hoping that the dominoes fall and the cards fall in our favor and we somehow squeak into the playoffs. And because nothing would be more devastating than winning out and crushing our draft capital and mm-hmm. missing the playoffs. Like that would be the most devastating outcome, but it's entirely within the range of outcomes.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot of conversations to be had in the off season. I want to say also it's completely healthy to move off of players and have it be amicable. Like it's completely okay with that. Like if they feel like Jermaine Pratt is no longer the guy that they allocated resources to, thinking that he was deserving of it. Maybe at the time he was, but maybe he just looks like a completely different player. Maybe the fact that he looks a little bit stuck in the mud is lack of confidence in what's playing behind him. Like there's so much that goes into it, and it's going to be a long off season. We're going to have so many conversations throughout the process, but I mean, I don't think anything is set in stone one way or the other.
Yeah, we got a couple good questions here. One was from Alex Charneski. He said, do you guys think the Bengals will beat the Broncos? He's asking from Denver. I'm guessing he's a either a Broncos fan or he's a Bengals fan in Denver. What do you guys think? Who wins that game?
I'm not gonna. I appreciate you asking that question. I don't even want to think about. I want to think about the Tennessee Titans next week.
Yeah.
I don't even know how they're gonna look by the time we face the Broncos. It really is a week to week thing when it comes to the Bengals, and that's just a tip of the hat to you guys because you guys have looked awesome. If you are a Broncos fan or if you're a Bengals fan, Broncos have looked good, and I think there's no game anymore that's there's no game anymore I look at and I say, hey, it's a definite win for the Bengals, especially with how things look. So respectfully, let's see how how they look against the Tennessee Titans, against a guy and Brian Callahan who knows them literally to the core. And we'll see how it all shakes out.
So we got a question from Percy
I
Jack.
don't know if Mike wanted to touch on that.
I'll field the question with Malik, but I agree that it's very much a week-to-week game. I really do think it comes down to what form of Bo Nix we get at quarterback against the Broncos. Bo Nix has looked great as of late, but he has also very much looked like a rookie at times. And I know that was a lot earlier in the season. He's got another 6 to 8 games under his belt since he's looked truly not great, but I really do think that Bo Nix is the caliber of quarterback who is capable of having a bad game here and there. And I do think Jamar Chase is the caliber of receiver who can contend with Patrick Surtain. So I think the Bengals can give the Broncos a run for their money. But like Malik said, I mean, we have to take this week to week as Bengals fans because one more loss and the season is over with.
It's over.
Yeah, you really, as a Bengals fan, you can't look more than 1 week ahead on the schedule.
You know, I saw somebody say earlier, I don't know if they deleted the comment, but it was like, we need a top pick in, we need a top 8 pick in each round. Hold that thought for a second. So you want the Bengals to lose out, not you, Mike. It was somebody in the chat. You want the Bengals to lose out to help improve their draft capital. So you want them to have an obvious, surefire pick in the top 10. Why? Let's ask ourselves that question. Why is that? Because when we say things like that, we're getting to the root of the issue. The reason why we want the Bengals to have a surefire pick within the top 10 is because we don't have confidence in our front office and our scout team to get us the necessary players or to find the gems. So you want the most surefire, obvious pick that's going to slap you right in the face and land in your hands. That's what it is. So in the NFL, right, unless you're just piss poor, there's no way a Bengals team with Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins should be picking in the top 10. No. Should be picking in the top 5. There's no reason in hell that should be the case. So ask yourself if the reasoning is why you want the Bengals to land a top 8 pick, a top 10 pick, is because you don't trust the front office. You don't trust Duke and his staff. What is the common denominator there? Maybe the Bengals need to add more scouts to their department. Maybe the Bengals need an actual GM in the building. See, now we're getting somewhere. Now we're actually peeling it back layer by layer. And I'm talking to the soul of the Cincinnati Bengals here when I'm speaking. That's the reason why we want the Bengals. No, because there's no way you're a Bengals fan in the chat. There's no way you're a Bengals fan rooting for this team and you're saying, I want them to lose. Because nobody wants to see the Bengals lose. The only reason why you would want to see the Bengals lose is because you have rooting interest in draft positioning. And you have rooting interest in draft positioning because you don't have confidence in the front office to select the right players unless they're smacking you right in the face. Because let's face it, the drafts that they have hit on, it was obvious picks. It was obvious picks. The Joe Burrow draft, it were obvious, easy picks. They were easy picks. The Jamar Chase, it was easy picks, and you still found a way to F up the Jackson Carman pick in the second round. For me, it doesn't have to be that, right? It doesn't have to be that. It could be something completely different. And you see, I've got something really, really big planned. For those of you who don't know, I run a company called the Right Way Sports Network. We're based here in Cincinnati. But I have something really, really, really cool planned that we're going to do. We're big into draft content. We're big into scouting players. We're big into all that kind of stuff like that. We're going to do our part where I'm going to have literally a team that's going to be dedicated to just scouting players, prospects, strictly for the Cincinnati Bengals. I will use my contacts that I have, and I will just forward that information over to the contacts that I have. I want nothing in return for it. Financially, I want nothing in return for it. But I'm going to have guys at the Senior Bowl. I'm going to have guys at the Combine. We're going to talk to these guys. We're going to talk to some of these players. It's what we do. I'm just going to do our part because, like I said, when I came to Cincinnati, that was the vision that I had. The Bengals aren't going to do what's, their part. I can simply just play a very, very small part and do my part because I do run a sports media company that covers the NFL in detail. So that's just my thought process. Daniel.
No, for sure. Yeah, I think that I'm excited for that. I'm excited for draft season where we're going to get to a bunch of these guys, whether it's defensive guys, like top 10, Mason Graham, all those guys. But we had a couple more questions. Some people were asking about a little bit into the offseason. Rage Al Ghul said, we have a lot of cap space this offseason, even after signing, Jamar Chase. What would you guys do with the money this offseason? Where would you guys allocate the Bengals money this offseason?
I want to get Mike in here to talk, but I want to make sure that I'm extremely, extremely clear. I am staring at the defense, and I'm going to literally remake this defense this offseason. You say you want more speed on the defense, I'm going to get you that. You say you want linebackers that can move, I'm going to get you that. All the resources, the same thing you did in 2020 and 2021, you need to do this offseason. You need to have a completely overhaul on the defense. You have young players that you can kind of build off of. You have these aging vets that are probably going to get out of here. Their contracts that will come off the books. And you're probably going to have a lot of money opening up. If the Bengals play their cards right, they can have upwards to $100 million in cap space to work with this offseason. What are you going to do with those resources? Defense is an issue. You know that you have guards that you need to figure out the guard position. Hopefully you have your tackle spot figured out. For me, I want the Bengals to address defense in free agency, hopefully address the guard positioning in free agency. And then by the time you get to the draft, it's about the future. It's about the future. So you know what the future looks like for me? I'm drafting the best defensive end available. I'm drafting the best defensive end, not a guy that has intangibles, not a guy that has poor production in college, but we like his measurables, so we're going to draft the guy. No. I want a guy that is the consensus best player available from the past. You don't need to be the smartest person in the room. Draft best player available. That's what I would do personally. Mike, I don't know about you, but that's what I would do.
Oh, yeah. I was going to go straight to the defensive line.
Mm-hmm.
I really hope we can get Trey Hendrickson back on a team-friendly deal. It's not usually in the Bengals front office modus operandi to re-sign a guy who's 30 years old. But, I mean, Trey Hendrickson is performing at the top of the NFL. I mean, this is one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. And I get he's aging, but still, keep this guy in the building. And then I miss DJ Reader on this defensive line, just seeing him manhandle double teams and still blowing up plays, like just completely overhauling and reworking this defensive line, getting a push in the interior to blow up run plays, getting someone to rush the passer. I mean, when you have an elite pass rush, it just makes everyone else's jobs easier. I mean, the back end and the secondary, the linebackers, it just makes everything easier when you can disrupt plays with ease and get to the quarterback in a matter of seconds. It just makes everything so much simpler, and you don't have to worry about keeping players in coverage for 3+ seconds. I really want to see them go towards the defensive line and make some changes there. It pains me that we lost DJ Reader last offseason, but it is what it is. It's time to recoup, reevaluate, and find some new players, whether it be in free agency or the draft. But that is one positional group that I desperately needs to be addressed this offseason.
And William Perry says, so what if it ain't be best player available? Sorry. So what if best player available ain't defensive line when the pick comes up? I'm picking best player available, regardless of what that looks like. That's just my thought process. It could be a wide receiver. It could be whatever. I am going to do everything in my power to, we talked about this on State of the Jungle a couple weeks back. I believe in doubling up, tripling up on positions. If that's what the board dictates, that's what you do, because you draft for the future. That is what it should always be. That's what it should always be. Maybe you say quarterback is in a spot where I like. Well, then you go a different position, or you trade back, or whatever the case may be. you really do have to look at it and try to draft best player available. I saw somebody ask earlier about Malachi Starks.
Mhm.
That is a guy that I've loved. I've talked about him since last year. Do they dip into that pool and do they try to say, hey, we're going to go out there and we're going to add a young safety again, someone that's going to take a little bit to learn this defense? Safety is a tricky position sometimes come to the NFL with and make an immediate impact as well. So, but 100% you draft best player available no matter what.
No, for sure. And we had a question from Percy.
By the way, I just think that the board is going. I just want to say, I'm sorry, I keep talking.
No, you're good.
And I don't know where I got this jolt of energy from. I'm not working off any caffeine, but I believe that I just believe that the best player available, the board might shape up to be a defensive line prospect. That's just what I think.
Well, and obviously we'll get more into this come draft season, but it's very obvious this wide receiver class. First off, it's very thin at the top. And you're probably going to be picking from 10 to 15 to 18. There is an abundance of defensive tackles and edge rushers in this year's class. There is one premier edge rusher. There's one premier defense tackle, but there's at least 6 guys that are clearly going to be a first round to early second round defensive edge, and clearly 4 to 5 defense tackles. So if the Bengals want to go defensive line in round 1, it is going to be there for them. But some people are asking about, would you guys entertain selecting an offensive lineman to replace Orlando Brown Jr. in a couple of years?
Yeah, sure. If it's best player available, I would. If Will Campbell slaps me in the face right there, I'm going after him. I mean, it's really just that simple because they're not in a position where they can say, outside of quarterback, they're really not in a position where they could just say, hey, we don't need it. Right. Like, I think that's just the reality of things.
Yeah, with the number of holes on this roster, I mean, taking the best player available approach, it more than likely will fill a hole on this roster and work out for this team. And yeah, the struggles of the Bengals' recent offensive line picks really pains me. Just seeing their consistent failure at identifying offensive line talent. Hopefully, Amarius Mims pays off, but largely they have struggled as a franchise to draft solid, consistent offensive linemen. So that pains me. But yeah, I wouldn't mind adding another tackle into the mix to set this team up for the future. But like I said, I personally would very much prefer someone on the defensive line.
So we got somebody talking about the Bengals game. Cade York deserves some love. What was you guys' thoughts on
Great
how
job, Cade. You
York
did your
played?
job. That's where it starts and ends for me. You did your job.
Made a couple extra points and a couple of kicks inside of 40 yards. I mean, yeah, that's what kickers are supposed to do. There's probably 100 guys who are able to do that job right now. So yeah, we'll give him a lucky star and pat him on the back, and we'll get him a sticker.
So we got Jacqueline Hyde was asking about Jermaine Burton. No Jermaine Burton tonight at all. What was you guys' thoughts on his? He played a little bit, but he didn't get any targets.
He had like a couple of offensive snaps. I'll say this. I've said this a couple weeks back. I think the impact you're expecting Jermaine Burton to make is going to be much more likely next year versus this year. I will say that the maturation of Jermaine Burton has definitely improved from people that I've talked to. And I think that's important. And that's what you were hoping to see, because early in the offseason, it was, he needs to learn to be a pro. He needs to be sleeping, missing meetings, the whole 9 yards, and all that stuff was real. And the fact that, he's approaching his business about a pro, and he's gaining the trust of the coaching staff, and they're relying on him more, whether it be the return duties, whatever the case may be. You just even look at his social media presence. He just seems to be in just a better space. So good for Jermaine Burton. But I think the impact you're really expecting to make is going to be much more likely next year, because the coaching staff clearly relies and trust a guy like Andre Yoshivas. And so, yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, it's pretty clear that they prefer and trust Yoshi and Mike Gesicki here. So, yeah, just a handful of snaps. I don't even think he cracked double digits in this one. So, yeah, Jermaine Burton, purely a deep threat at this point. They'll scheme him up on some vertical routes, some go routes here and there. But, yeah, like you said, I just don't think you can expect too much out of him this year. And potentially next season is when you can be looking for him to make an impact.
So we had Dejon Anthony was a healthy scratch today. Who Day MD asked what happened to Dejon Anthony.
I have no idea. I haven't asked. I just think that, Dejon, I still believe in my heart Dejon's going to be a good pro. It's about biding your time, and you can only have so many guys activated. Tyson Anderson's a special teams ace, so he's one defensive back. You got a guy like Von Bell, who's the backup, but / plays critical downs at points. You got Jordan Battle. You obviously have Geno Stone, who's the guy that you're not playing, right?
Yeah.
Do you put Dejon Anthony at corner? No, he's not a corner. He's a safety. So, if you were to make a guy like Dejon Anthony, what position group are you, slimming down essentially? Is it corner when you have so many question marks at the cornerback spot? Is it pass rusher when you need all the pass rush help you can get? Like it really does come down to it when it comes to being active on game day. It's about, hey, how is this thing going to look? How could this thing look? So I don't think it's anything indicative of Dejon Anthony being terrible or not having the trust of the coach. It's just the optics of it right now. Tyson Anderson's playing amazing as a special team. He's a special team ace for the Bengals this year. So,
yeah. So people are asking about the Bengals interior offensive line. What do you guys think? Because apparently it needs to be fixed big time. Do you guys think it needs to be fixed big time?
say that again.
The Bengals interior offensive line.
Yes, I mean, but again, for things to change, the Bengals have to approach it differently. As Mike said, they have to, in the words of Michael Hara, they have to modernize in a lot of ways. They have to be open to opening up the pocketbook to interior offensive linemen that can really make a difference on your starting quarterback. And until that changes, unfortunately, I think the guard play will always look average and look like this, unless you somehow land on drafting a Kevin Zeitler, who's still playing out of this world, who you let walk out the door, or you land on a good pro in Clint Boyling, who winds up abruptly retiring at some point. Like this is what it's gonna look like unless the Bengals change their philosophy on interior offensive linemen. And I don't mean by the draft. I mean actually opening up the pocketbook and saying, hey, we're going to add an interior offensive lineman that could truly make a difference, that we could be proud to block for our quarterback.
Yeah. This is a scrap everything, and we have to bring in some new talent. I mean, Cordell Volson, I think it was 2 penalties on him tonight. Just I think the fan base can completely agree that this interior offensive line is a complete teardown and rebuild. I mean, whether that happens via free agency or the draft, I know we've talked about it a lot tonight, best player available versus addressing positional need, but that is certainly a position of need for the Cincinnati Bengals. I don't know if it's the number 1 on the priority list. It's not for me personally, but yes, it's with 100% certainty that changes need to be made. And I mean, with the offensive philosophy on this team, you just need guys who can pass protect. I mean,
yes.
I think heading into the fourth quarter, we had maybe a dozen runs as a team. Like this is just a team that's not looking to run the ball. They need stellar guys in pass protection. So yeah, this is 100% a positional group that needs to be addressed.
Yes, 100%.
And we have, you talked about best player available. Percy Jackson had a question. Let's say it comes down to best player available, Mason Graham or Malachi Starks. Who would you guys pick?
That's a very loaded question. And not because you did anything wrong. You didn't. I'm torn. I believe the defensive line will look drastically different if you add somebody like a Mason Graham to it personally. And you pair Mason Graham up with Chris Jenkins for the future, well, your defensive tackle room is solved. Does a Malachi Starks could be the best safety in the world, but if your defensive line is shit, he's gonna struggle. Especially with him being a rookie. So I think I lean the Mason Graham side.
Yeah, I think a lot of it does come down to what the Bengals do in free agency and where they choose to address and spend their money prior to the draft. But I've talked about it a couple of times. I'm really big on the defensive line making changes. I would love to see Mason Graham on this team. I just saw him destroy my Ohio State Buckeyes in the shoe. So he can prove to be a game wrecker at the collegiate level, and I do think his game will translate to the NFL. And I would be a big fan of him in the Bengals stripes.
Tom Jones talked about the Bengals defense a little bit. He said, I liked loose stunts tonight on the defensive line. I actually agree with him. You guys have any thoughts on how the defensive line looked with the stunts tonight?
I thought the defensive line looked good. And I thought that they were able to do some things to confuse the Dallas Cowboys offensive line. But I also do know, not taking anything away from them, Zach Martin's obviously out, who's also been kind of shaky this year. I know he's contemplating retirement. But, I think that they overwhelmed that Dallas offensive line a bunch today. And I loved crowding the line of scrimmage, with a bunch of defensive guys, trying to just confuse a guy like Cooper Rush. Cooper Rush has been around the league for a while now, but he definitely seemed like he was confused on a couple things, making him hold the ball just extra second longer to help your pass rush get there. I loved seeing Joseph Asai work in the inside. That was new. Seeing him work on the inside, and he had a great rep against Tyler Smith, who I think is a very good guard in the league. So I thought there was a lot of positives. I thought Lou did a great job, but I also thought it was about players being assignment sound today.
Yeah, Daniel talked about it earlier, that stunt from Geno Stone coming up the middle completely unblocked. I really thought that was a great play call from Lou Anarumo, and exciting to see that we're just generating, whether it's schemed up via the play call or it's players just simply beating their man and winning on their reps. I just want to see this defense generating pressure, regardless of how it comes. I'm just happy to see them getting pressure on the quarterback.
Right. I agree.
You guys have any other takeaways from tonight's game?
I will say this, Bengals fans, don't focus so much on playoffs or anything like that right now. Focus on really, what the positives could be of this team. This feels different from, Marvin Lewis's last year in Cincinnati, where it was just completely just bad and it was bad football. You just knew overall change had happened. Really evaluate this team from a scout's perspective, from a front office perspective. What is it that you want to see from some of these players? Because albeit the results haven't been what we wanted them to be, all you can do is really just look forward. And we have 4 games to analyze that. We have a month essentially to analyze what this Bengals team is going to look like for the future. Who are your building blocks? Can you rely on a Miles Murphy? Can you rely on a Jordan Battle? Can Geno Stone be the guy to some degree that he was in Baltimore? Wasn't absolutely a fluke. Can Jermaine Pratt find the fountain of youth again? Those are questions you have to ask yourself. Does Chris Jenkins look like a guy that you can build the interior defensive line through? Does he? Do we need to pair Chris Jenkins with someone, or do we need to completely draft 2 more other defensive tackles? These are questions you have to ask yourself. Look at it from that perspective, and I think you'll find yourself enjoying the game a whole lot more. I personally was analyzing everything from the game today. I saw things that I wanted to see. I see the vision of bringing in Mike Gesicki back and what that could mean for this team. I feel like the receiver room is in such a volatile state that you almost have to bring back a Mike Gesicki, right? It was through these weeks, and again, opinions can change. Don't be that person that dies on a hill just for the sake of dying on a hill. Opinions can change throughout the next couple of weeks. Okay? Opinions can change throughout the next couple of weeks. You might walk away from this next couple of weeks and say, Geno Stone is going to have a breakout year next year with the Bengals. You might. You could. Because guess what? Players sometimes play better when it's less pressure on them. Maybe they can kind of feel like they can grow into their own. Maybe they put too much pressure on themselves. I have no idea. But start approaching it from a different perspective. What is it? Ask yourself, what is it that you're hoping to see? The Bengals got to feel good from what they've seen from Chase Brown. Yeah. They got to feel that they maybe can find somebody that can truly be a backup to Chase Brown. Maybe like a guy that can get those short yardage situations in the case if you need to spell Chase Brown. Chase Brown's proven himself. Yeah. Right? I mean, there's a lot to take away still, a lot of football left to be played. Just my thought process.
Yeah, I was going to go kind of along the same lines as you, Malik, just looking forward to the future. We all kind of know that the playoffs are kind of leaving our grasp. Like the odds are very, very stacked against us. So you kind of just have to look forward and find things to be excited about moving forward. And one of the names that came to mind for me immediately was Chase Brown. I am, as a Bengals fan, very excited to watch Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and Chase Brown take the field for the Cincinnati Bengals for the foreseeable future. If you're not excited to see that trio on the offensive side of the ball for the next Burrow 10 years, Chase however long that contract is, and perhaps Chase Brown gets a second contract with the Bengals. So I think that can be that trio can be a key piece of the Bengals offensive core moving forward. And I've liked what I've seen from him throughout the year. It's unfortunate to waste Burrow's best season of his career into what will likely be a season where we miss the playoffs, but it is what it is. We know we have 3 studs moving forward into the future. So you just have to be happy happy with what we have on the roster currently, and we know that we're going to move forward with these guys and find success down the line.
I agree. And the last thing I'll say is, someone said my biggest worry is, Matt Balance and Bike Life said, my biggest worry is the rest of these games. We win the rest of these games and we keep Taylor and stuck in mediocrity. Let me just say this. I think that there's pressure no matter which way you slice it. I think no matter which way you slice it, there's still pressure. Because you could take the one notion, you could say the organization knows how talented this team is. And they're expecting them to win these games down the stretch because look at the teams they're facing. And you have to ask yourself, are the Bengals more talented than the teams that they haven't left on their schedule? And the answer should be yes. So it could be a double-edged sword to that. It could be, well, we won the games we're expected to win. I know it ain't the players. Maybe we need to change a voice because it'll show some coach that, hey, we can still win with these players that we have. Do we need to upgrade the defense? Yes. Do we need to help Joe Burrow with the interior offensive line? Yes. But maybe the coaching, maybe the ownership group says, maybe their takeaway is they've gone as far as they could under a Zach Taylor. Maybe the ownership group's thoughts processes, we need a new voice in the locker room, or we need a new voice leading the charge from a GM perspective. There's a lot to be taken away. I think that everybody shares blame in this, the way the season has unfolded. And I think regardless, conversations, uncomfortable conversations will be had. And they need to be had. That's just my thought process. Mike, you have anything else you want to add before we head out of here?
Yeah, just trying to pin the blame on one person, one aspect. It's tough to do. I think, like you said, it's a blend of everything. And just as a whole, as an organization, things need to be reevaluated this offseason. But I think the future is bright for the Cincinnati Bengals. I think we can make progress as a franchise, as an organization this offseason with what we do in free agency and how we opt to adapt and build this roster moving forward around Joe Burrow. So I'm really excited to see what the future holds for this team, even though it may not be super positive moving forward for this individual season.
Absolutely. Dan, you got anything else you want to add before we head out of here?
I would just say that I'm just all around excited just to see how the rest of the season plays out. I think 2 weeks ago, and even heading into this game, it's like, man, it just feels so different as of, just looking at the game saying, man, like you're fighting for the playoffs, but you're not really. Like you got a 2% chance. So I'm just excited at this point. This game kind of helped rejuvenate and say, hey, there is still a lot to analyze about this team, and how these next 4 games look is really a huge start into the Bengals offseason, to where that's where Super Bowl teams really are, won and lost is the offseason.
Mm-hmm.
So just excited to see the fight in this team, and excited to see, honestly, just how well Jamar and Joe Burrow keep looking these next couple games. And hopefully some young guys step up like a Jordan Battle or Chris Jenkins to really make themselves, put themselves in position for next season.
Right. Look, we appreciate you guys so much for tuning in to another episode of the Sit Down Malik Wright Recap Show. I'll be back live tomorrow, 10 a.m. Well, today it's 12. It's midnight. Back tomorrow, today at 10 a.m. with Zim as we break this thing through even more. We talk it through. Make sure you guys join us as we'll be talking Bengals, the NFL, and so much more tomorrow on the Sit Down Morning Show. Malik Wright. We appreciate you guys for making us a part of your daily Bengals routine after a game. And until next time, as always, who dat?
All they ever do is win, so kick that, relax.